Hello and welcome everyone to the One Voice series. I'm Mita Sani and I'm joined today by Adeline Liu. Hi Adeline, how are you doing?
Good. Hi, Rita. Thanks for having me today.
A real pleasure to have you on board and thank you for being part of the One Voice journey. For those of you who are watching and don't know the background, Adeline and myself and a couple of other members of the Women of the Future Network, we all met over a virtual coffee morning during the pandemic.
Hmm.
I remember at that time, were you finding it really difficult to connect? Like, how did you find it? Because I think it was back in June when it was all still quite new.
Yes, I think everyone was really friendly. I mean, especially you. I love the connections we got out of that breakfast meeting. Everyone came with open hearts and we just shared because I guess your journey is always like somebody out there would love to hear your journey, right? So there are different stages of their life, and your journey could be an encouragement to someone else. So that was fantastic for me, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And it was adjudicated by Chris Southam, who is also
Mhm.
part of this series. And hopefully, I speak on behalf of all of us today when I say that what we had a bit of a eureka moment that day, didn't we? We were talking about well, first of all, being women of the future, um, co-members of this fantastic network. One thing that we've seen is that Pinky Lilani has, always led the way and given us empowerment. And how do you know the Women of the Future Network? What's your history here?
As in, how did I get to
Yeah,
find out about it?
yeah. So I
So,
believe you would have been nominated for an award, or did you win an award?
I'm a nominee for 2020 for the Property Construction Infrastructure category. Yeah, for Southeast
Fantastic.
Asia. Yeah. It came through a nomination in the sense that the last year's winner, oh no, 2019 winner was Josephine Lee, from Singapore. And one of our mutual friends wrote to me and said, Adeline, would you like to put yourself forth? And I was like, I was a bit on the fence. I was like, I don't think I qualify. And he was like, you know what? Don't self disqualify. Just try it. So with that, I went around asking my clients. I said, should I go for this? And they said, sure. Do you need a testimony? They were giving me testimonials and everything. And yeah, the rest is history. It's been a fantastic journey, actually. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, congratulations, because straight away what you said about, self-disqualifying, I think as women, we naturally question our own self-worth and the value we add. And I'm a finalist from back in 2015 now. God, that seems like 2016, ages ago, in the Entrepreneur of the Year award. And as a finalist, I lost out to a fantastic woman who was just trailblazing in what she does. But just becoming part of this network, and not only the achievements of the group, but how much they care, just shone through. So when we had that coffee morning that day, we were talking about relationships, and I think you mentioned that you had married the man of your choice rather than the man that your family had chosen for you. Tell me about that.
Yes. So I think my parents really wanted me to marry a certain kind of guy. Because I mean, with all parents, right, you want the best for your child, right? And only to have your child grow up and say, Mom, I think I want something else. I think I really want to marry this guy, which is my husband. I mean, I've been happily married for 6 years now. We got married in 2015. And I guess only time will tell. Obviously, the first few years were pretty tough. But after 6 years of being really happily married, even up to now, my mom is like, you know what? He's starting to grow on me. It just took a little bit more time, yeah, than normal. Yeah.
And we have a background. We have the Asian background. Obviously, you're from
Mm,
Singapore. My
yep.
history is Indian, but
Yep.
straight away we saw some synergies, didn't we, with the expectations that were put upon us in the relationship space.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's all about tick boxes, right? When you're in school, your parents say, you know what, you need to do well in math, English, sciences, everything. So as you grow older, you're like, okay, this is the box. I'm supposed to fit into this box. Anything outside of this box, maybe I shouldn't venture too far out. So I guess over time, I was a really good student. I was a prefect, I was a teacher's pet, I was the eldest. So whatever my parents said, I just did. I didn't
Yeah.
challenge them. I just felt like, because on top of that, Mita, we have filial piety, right? We are supposed to respect our elders, whatever they ask us to do, we do. So it was really a very interesting journey for me to challenge that, so in a respectful manner, not to say that, you know what, you're wrong, but more like, Mom, I agree with you. I know you love me, but is it possible for me to try it this way? Yeah. So that was how I slowly edged out. Yeah. Over the years.
I got goosebumps, and I said to you, that is amazing that you found your voice so early on. Whereas for me, I think I started to work on finding my voice in my 40s. You had already done the work to find your voice and know what you wanted in your 20s. And so from that, we thought, if we can find a way to help our women's network and Women of the Future network to have some tools and some points of reflection that can help them find their voice even earlier, then hopefully that will help them make the right choices. So you are our first guest. So thank you for being part of the inaugural video podcast. We actually, for our viewers today, we actually have 4 topics that we're covering. We are starting with early years. We are then doing relationships, which you're talking with us today about. And then we're actually going to be speaking about careers and the career echo in other podcasts as well. So hopefully we can help women through the journey.
Yep.
And so without further ado, let me get some slides up, Adeline, because I definitely feel that as much as today is a chat, a meeting of minds, if you like, I think for our audience, we want them to be able to go away with not only an understanding of your journey and the journey of finding your voice in relationships, but also how that process can apply to so many different things. So hopefully you can see on the page here, we've got a quote by Socrates, a quote that says, "Know thyself." Have you heard that quote before?
Yep.
Yeah, it's prominent in the Bible as well, right? I mean, it is literally, it's the foundations of us as human beings and what our purpose is really in our life journey. I also feel that, what it alludes to on this opening slide is very much that when we don't have that self-knowledge or self-awareness, we can end up making decisions that aren't right for us. And that just expends so much energy, and it just means we end up living a life that's more challenged than necessarily has to be.
Yep, I totally agree. Can't agree any more than what you've just said, because I mean, even Albert Einstein said, right, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, you're not gonna get there, right? So I mean, you can conform yourself. I think a lot of women, sometimes we're really compromising. It's to a fault sometimes, because we feel like we are supposed to be there to marry everyone together. We're supposed to be a mediator. We're supposed to be more gentle, things like that. Not asking you to give that up, but also to dig deep into your own voice. Because sometimes we may be, I don't know, you may have a very domineering parent, or may have a domineering sibling, and then sometimes you just inch in on yourself and you give your power away. So I personally went through that journey. If you keep giving your power away, one day you find that, okay, I wake up and I go like, okay, wait, I need a reality check. Am I in the right place again? So slowly reclaim your power, which is your own voice. How do you do that, right? I mean, I think this is your slide to talk about it. Yeah, right?
Absolutely. That's what this is about, is how do you find that voice? Where does that voice come from to start with, right? So just wanted to just do an overview of the fact that we're just going to walk through a little bit about where the voice comes from, how we separate the generational voices over our own voice, and then how we actually apply that in the decisions we make. That's what Adeline and I are going to talk about over the next 20 minutes or so. So Adeline, tell me, when did you first start thinking about what relationships meant for you?
Wow, when did I first start thinking about that? I guess really seriously at 14 years old. I didn't have my first boyfriend at 14. It's just that I accepted Christ at 14. So I guess that was why it hit me, because most people, I mean, the world would say that, a relationship is between boy and girl. But for me, when I was 14, I got saved and decided to follow Jesus. It's like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Like unconditional love. That was the first kind of relationship I thought about. Yeah.
And did you have influences around you where you started to think, yep, that's something I want for my future relationship, or that's something that, you know, that I'm definitely not going to replicate that in my life? Like, did you come across people in your day-to-day life?
I guess my parents, because they are really loving. So their love story is pretty long. But long story short, my mom always say when someone's supposed to be for you and meant to be for you will always be there for you. No matter how far you let them go, they'll still come back to you. That's what my mom always say. And my dad and my mom, they have a fantastic relationship. My dad loves her a lot. My mom, she basically is the perfect mother. She gave up everything to look after me and like myself and my sis. A lot of sacrifices, and I think a lot of women on the call will understand that, right? I mean, being a mother, it's like there's no greater job than that. So I guess looking at how my parents related to each other and how they actually related to us taught me a lot about relationships, respect, you know, and also to also be your own person sometimes. I mean, it took a while, but it was a journey. Yeah.
And that's interesting because I also, you know, the first point on this slide talks about what the meaning of partnership is, and not actually the meaning of marriage, but the fact that the person we choose to walk the path of our life together, you know, that is going to last decades. It's, you know, and who we are in that time evolves. So knowing thyself and knowing one's own voice and what matters to us is something, if we start earlier in life, means that we can make that right choice for the life partner. But it's really interesting, you know, did your parents have an arranged marriage, or was it a more Western approach?
Oh, it was a love marriage. So it's like, it was more Western approach. Yeah, I think only my great-grandparents were betrothed. So they are like an arranged marriage, my great-grandparents.
Yeah.
My grandparents were already a love marriage, and my mom, and that. Yeah.
And it's interesting from speaking with you and also speaking to other women from the network that I always thought that arranged marriages and, you know, a meeting of families, I thought that was a very just an Eastern, an Asian thing. But actually, culturally, it's also very much a part of the Western world, maybe not in as high percentages, but there are expectations all around us, actually, some more subtle than others. And I think historically, there was this feeling of, you find that person, you stay together, hell or high water. Whereas now we're finding there are far less people getting married. There are actually the rate of divorce is dropping, which is a great, you know, it's a good statistic that people are actually potentially finding their voice, getting married later, and therefore knowing what they're getting into and sticking to it. Tell me, how did that reflect for you from what you established from your own reflections of people in your world? What made you decide what was going to be the right relationship for you? What were the factors for you that were really important?
I would say that it's always through mistakes that teaches you what you actually want. So I'm quite sure all of us, not everyone is blessed to have the first boyfriend as your husband. Obviously, you will go through different channels and you have different boyfriends and you start to learn like, hey, it did not always end up marriage, right? But actually you learn a lot because with every guy you date, or, you know, you actually start to think, okay, do I want to be treated this way? Then you start formulating a plan in your head because you're going like, okay, he respects me, he disrespects me. What are my what are things that are my non-negotiables? You know, like I'm not going to negotiate if it comes to, like, for example, some women want children. They're like, no, children is number one priority. So for myself, I wanted a believer. So I needed someone who also believed in my same savior, right? So that was really important to me, someone sharing my same faith. That was like one of my non-negotiables, right? And like they have to also respect their parents, because I figured if you can't even respect, if my partner can't even respect their parent, how can they respect my parents? You know, things like that. So there were certain things that, which I strongly believe it distills down to your core, your own values internally, your compass, your moral compass. So once you have that, it's easier to figure out what is a right relationship for you. So what might be right for one lady may not be right for the other lady. You know what I mean? So you need to know what's right for yourself. Yeah. It's a discovery journey. Yeah.
It is a discovery journey, and that's what the One Voice series is all about, is how you can do some exercises or self-reflecting, that is finding what your moral compass is, as you said. And I think for me, you know, I met my husband, we had a love marriage when I was 18. You know,
Wow.
actually I mean, God, you know, when you think about, I came very much from the generation where I have 3 older brothers who are 10 to 15 years older than me, and all had arranged marriages. But I am very much, you know, first generation child of immigrants, and very much 2 cultures, both working against each other and for each other, you know. So for somebody, and a lot of children who are growing up now, and young, you know, young women who have finished university and thinking about that, also have those influences that sometimes work towards each other, but often can work in conflict. And I think for me, the value system and the understanding came later. And I think that's where, when you get, you know, when you join with somebody, it's understanding that, as you said, those first years of alignment are really hard. And then knowing that actually you have to continually work on it to bring yourselves back to the values. And I'm with you, you know, for me, the value that shone out and out was this family. You know, it was finding somebody who values their parents, values their siblings, values their culture and religion, you know. And that doesn't mean you have to be from the same background. It's having that respect. But, you know, for us, you know, for me, I'm you know, I'm 20 odd years ahead, but, you know, for you, what were so the church, I know, was very important to you, and we talk about resources and ways to find your voice. For you at 14, you had a moment of knowing yourself through Jesus, and you mentioned that. What other ways do you think young women could find themselves dating? I mean, you mentioned dating. Dating is huge, because you know, tell me about that, because what you said about knowing what you won't stand for, I think is so powerful.
Correct. So basically, don't blame the guys that are no longer in your life. Thank them, because they taught you something that you do not want and you do not compromise for. So I always tell a lot of women, be it a marriage that failed, be it a relationship that failed, I always say that there's no love lost, because what happened is that you actually learned something about yourself. That person unlocked something that you didn't know was there, right? And there is nothing such as, I think every experience is a positive experience. It's about what you learn from it. So that was one of the things I really want to bring up, because I've had friends who came out of really terrible marriages, but then when I look at them, they're so much stronger now. Because another thing is, you might end up getting married initially, and you are this person and you are this person. Two separate people join in marriage, correct? But at that juncture, say, I don't know, early 20s or late 30s or late 40s, when you first got married, as you grow, because someone once told me this, even for flying, you know, on the planes, all the pilots, they say that they always have to recalibrate if they're trying to fly straight. Because if you don't recalibrate, you would just fly like that. And before you know, you're like, okay, empty nest syndrome, I don't get along with you, let's part. So even when you're married, like my husband and I, we actually prioritize date nights. I know this sounds crazy, right? But we constantly try to date each other, and sometimes you play things. We would like role play, and he would like go outside, like, oh, who's this nice lady? Can I get your number? Even after 6 years of being married, he still does that. But it's quite funny, because you have to keep the love alive. A lot of people think that marriage is just, oh, once it's signed, it's done. Nah, it's just the beginning. Yeah.
They think marriage is the finish line, when it's actually the starting line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And I guess what we're talking about is having done the training to know that we're going to be in the right headspace to be on this race, till this journey together. But also what you've spoken about and what follows is the dating game. Yes, it's important when you're single, because you establish your do's and your don'ts, and you find your self-worth in that, which is really important to reflect. It also continue the dating game. And I hadn't thought of that when I put these points on the slide, but that's what today's about. I love it. It's just really pulling together our thoughts and sharing that with our audience today. So, you know, date night. And actually, I think that for my husband and I, the hardest time was, you know, we waited 13 years together before we had children, thinking, oh, you know, when the kids come, it'll be fine. We've heard about couples going like that, but because we've had 13 such great years, that won't happen to us. But it did. You know, we went through many difficult years, because we became parents but we forgot how to be in a relationship.
Mhm.
And then you have another value system coming into it, which is, where do you stand as a parent? Like, where are your priorities? And I can speak for, I've put motherhood on here. I know you're not a mum yet. But that's when your parallels really shift, because as much as a man can support and sympathize, he will not go through what the mother will go through. And therefore, the communication is even more important at that time.
Yep.
When did you and your husband talk about parenting and whether, what that means for both of you? When did that come in?
That was during our dating phase and also before marriage, because for our church, you need to go for premarital counseling before you actually do the deed, I think, the sign. They need to make sure that there's alignment, because some people through premarital counseling, you realize that, hey, maybe my view on finances is not as similar to yours, or like my view on kids is not similar to yours. So sometimes some couples within the church actually do split up after the premarital counseling, because they realize that, oh wow, because sometimes, okay, so today I had lunch with a very nice girlfriend of mine, and then she broke off a relationship after 6 years. And I asked her why. She said, you know what, when we're together, we play games, we go out to nice dining restaurants and everything. We talk about the non-essential stuff. She said, we never hit on the hardcore, life-changing stuff, like your house, what are you going to do with finances, how are we going to plan ourselves, how are we going to upgrade ourselves, and things like that. The real life matters. So she said that when push comes to shove and she was about to sign, they realized that they were actually not on the same page at all, despite being together for 6 years. And they were just going through the motion, because, in Asian culture, it's like, oh, you've been dating this girl so long. Are you going to marry her? Parents will start talking like that. And then you get the pressure of like, oh, time is ticking. I'm past 30. I should get married, things like that. So it was really brave of her. I told her it's great, because she said something that really struck a chord in me. She said, I'd rather not marry than marry the wrong person. Because then after that, you have a lot of pain, and a lot of women have to go through recovery because of that. Because sometimes there's still a stigma in Asia that if you do get a divorce, is there something wrong with yourself? Is there something wrong with your partner? But sometimes it's not something wrong with anyone. It's just that people change. And like, obviously, or you didn't change. You just finally had your voice. You know what your voice is. You know what I mean? Because before marriage, you're like, okay, I'm going to compromise. Yeah. But there's only so much you can compromise. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. And again, I think that this is the value that we hope to be able to bring from this series, is being able to do that self-reflection. And you spoke about the church as, having that structure and going through premarital counseling. So powerful. I've actually got a slide on some of the resources that our audience can pick on. But I definitely, if you are religious and you are, part of a religious community, find out what they do. Because I know in my culture, we didn't have that. I'm a Sikh. Nobody required my husband and I to go through this premarital counseling. And I think it's so important. I think, but if you don't have a church that you can relate to, there are so many organizations out there. And actually, I haven't asked this company if I can use their name, but it's an online site called the School of Life. And they have some fantastic tools. So they'll have cards which go through those questions: relationship, parenthood, finances, where you stand as children of your parents, taking care of the elderly. When your parents get old, are you going to look after them, or are you going to put them in a home? Things that when you're in your late teens, early 20s, who thinks about those things, right? So really important. What we want our audiences to be able to go away with is almost a map of potential routes that they can take towards finding their voice in relationships. And hopefully from what we've spoken about today, they can have a starting point on that. Because as you said, it's a continual journey, isn't it? The voice and honing the voice. Tell me about a time when you may have been challenged in having your voice, where you want it against your relationship and what matters to you as a couple versus what matters to you as an individual. Am I putting you on the spot?
No. It's perfectly fine. I'm just trying to think of a scenario or a recent case study about what you just said. That's a very tough one, Because so far,
Shall I tell you my one? I'll tell you my one
sure.
just while you're
Okay.
thinking, because
Yeah.
I was very career driven in my 20s. I was qualifying as an accountant. I wanted to get all of my qualifications done before I became a mom. And my husband wanted us to, because we'd been together for so long, he was sort of saying, well, come on, let's think about starting a family. And I said, well, I want to finish my professional qualifications, because when I do stop to have our child, I want to know that I'm at a place in my career where it doesn't go backwards by me being away. We're talking 16 to 20 years ago that we were having this conversation, and the world has evolved in that time. Maternity is still far more inclusive than it was back in the day, but some of the challenges still stand. And I think for the Women of the Future Network, who we are and what we do is right up there with being a good partner and a good mother. So it's getting the balance of how your voice can be supported in all of those areas. And for us, that was probably the first challenge we had, where we didn't see eye to eye. And it required us to really go back to the basics of what we stand for and really understanding the whys. And I think so often couples will talk about, and this is whether they're dating or in a marriage, what they want without actually unraveling, where is this coming from, And for us, it became very much about him understanding my career objectives, me understanding his drivers for parenthood, and eventually we compromised. And rather than waiting 5 years, we waited only 2.5 years. But we moved forward on that journey together. And I think the process of peeling back the layers and really getting back to the core drivers that create the challenges, because ultimately it's communication and clarity of what we both want, right? If we can peel those layers back, then you can start to be able to authentically help the other see where you're coming from. But if you haven't worked on your core and your voice, then you will find it difficult. One will find it difficult to be able to articulate what's important.
Mm-hmm. I was actually struggling to find a recent case, but I can tell you, because sorry, what were you saying?
No, I was going to say that's a good sign. That means you're obviously doing it so naturally now.
Yeah, and I think I'm pretty respectful, because the Bible teaches us to submit to our husband, okay, within reason, okay, and then husbands love your wives like how Christ loves the church. So there are certain programming, as you will, that's already been set into us because of just sharing the same faith. Would I have more things to have to put my foot down if we were not from the same faith? Maybe slightly more, I guess. Because every time when there's an argument or whatever, we could have some like a SOP, if you will, which is the Bible. So like having this, it's really awesome. You just need to flip it open and go like, hey, what does it say? You know what I mean? So it's like pointing not to ourselves, but to something else. So for people who are not sharing the same religion, you can have like a therapist, or you can talk about certain there are certain psychologists who actually have different ways of holding the floor when you communicate with each other. So like even for Singapore, so before you get married in Singapore, they do have marriage counseling that you have to go for. So it actually helps you to learn how to communicate better instead of flaring up. Some people would stonewall. Some people would, just just disappear on you, ghost you and things like that. So they teach you not to have all this, and also not to backbite and not to scream at each other or bite each other's heads off. So for me, I guess the closest I would go would be my husband wanted two cats. and, and I'm like, oh wow, 2 cats. If you do want to have it, I'm not going to have it at home. I can't imagine cleaning up fur balls all over the place, things like that. Because I have quite a hectic work schedule already. So I was like, darling, if you really, really, really need 2 cats, keep it in your office. And that really happened. So he has it in his office. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. And have you learned to love the cat a little bit? Like, have you warmed up a little bit to the cat, or is it just, no, that's his cat?
I'm okay with cats. It's just that I can't imagine. okay, so to that point, right? Sometimes I also think about children because I'm in my mid-30s. Obviously, I'm thinking about children because people always tell you, all your aunties and uncles who actually care about you. But you know how Asian families are, right? They come to you, hey, when are you gonna have a kid? When are you gonna have a kid? Your ovaries are degenerating. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I do not appreciate what you just said, but you know what I mean? Yeah. So I mean, for me, I think in his season. So I've been praying about it. I'm waiting. So obviously, I guess hopefully in the next 2 years you see me with twins. I'm praying for twins.
Oh, bless you.
Although
Well,
my thank you. Although in my husband's side and my side we do not have any like hereditary tree of twins, but I hope when it comes to me I'll get twins. Yeah.
oh, well, you're talking to the right person because I have twins.
Is it identical or inidentical?
No, non-identical. So I have a son
Oh,
who's nearly 17, and I have twin girls who are 14 next month. So yeah,
oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I
so
do want a boy and a girl. That's it. Yeah.
I love it. Well, obviously we have the surprise of two. My
Yeah.
husband still isn't over the surprise of double trouble. But you know what? I think that what you've said is so important because you're right. Actually, so many people talk about like looking after pets is almost you can't compare pets to children, but actually looking after pets is almost like a precursor to the shared responsibility of something and seeing how you fare in a relationship before you take that next step. So it is so important because I love that in Singapore you have a requirement for marriage counseling because here we have none of that. And I do think it adds to the challenges for couples stepping into a partnership, which we intend to make it for life. And my husband and I will have known each other for 30 years, married for 25 years this year. So
Wow.
and it definitely is it's a nurturing exercise, it's a respect exercise, and it's a not losing yourself but respecting each other's voice in that
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Adeline, I'm
It's
going to switch over to the next slide because
okay.
it actually already has covered a lot of the things we were speaking about. So,
Yeah.
we talked about religious institutions and how much they can guide you to have the right conversations.
Yeah.
And actually, individual counseling and couple counseling both have a place, right,
Yeah.
in relationships.
Yeah. Totally agree. And I love languages. That's a fantastic tool. So, ladies, if you guys want to test your husbands or partners to be, there is because you want to be loved the way you want to be loved, right? So your partner also wants to be loved the way they want to be loved. So there's this
Yeah.
interesting story about an old couple. So what happened is that every time a chicken comes, right, the whole chicken. So then the little girl will see her grandpa take the chicken thigh for grandma, and she'll be eating it very, very slowly. And then one day she's like, every time that happens, grandpa will just give it to grandma. And then one day she's like, grandma, you don't seem to really like chicken thigh, huh? It's like, yeah, but tell you a secret. Granddad has been doing this for the last 30 years. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. So what does this story tell you, right? It's like, if there's some communication or if you don't want to hurt other people's feelings, you can do this test and you learn how to love them in the right way, and therefore both of you be happy. It's a win-win situation, right? Because the test is taking it
Absolutely.
out of just the two of you. Yeah, correct.
That's beautiful. I love that because his way of showing love was through giving her something that he probably loves. So he wants her to
Precisely.
have it. So he's sacrificed that chicken thigh for his wife. And she's showing love by
Yeah,
actually
just
appreciating
extra.
the gesture rather
Yep.
than actually enjoying what he's given her. And I tell you
Yeah.
what, I only heard about love languages in the last couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years. And it's how some people will show love through service, some will show through affection, some will show through language. But I think there's something like 5 different love languages. And you're right. The question is, do you give love in the way the other wants to receive it? Or do you give love in the way that you want to receive it so they give it back? But I think that's the conversation you have as a partnership, right?
Yep. Precisely. So I think my husband would be quality time. And then for me, it's gifts, but not like the expensive kind. So, for example, if my shoes wear out or like my bag wears out and he suddenly surprises me with a new bag, I'll be like, oh, wow, like that's really thoughtful. So, for me, it's about the thought, behind the gift. And then for him, it's like me carving out time that is just us time. Nobody, no phones, no computers, no one to disturb us. We just go out for our walks, hold our hands, and go to the beach and then come back. Yeah, so it's just protected time for him. Yeah, so that's how he feels love. And he also has this thing called words of affirmation. So even up till now, I still write like on sticky pads. Sometimes I'll just say, for example, he cooked me dinner yesterday. So I'll write, like, dearest darling or baby, thank you so much for lunch yesterday. Smiley face, stuck it there. And then when he goes to the dishes, he's like, oh, something new. You know what I mean? So it's also about having two jars whereby you're always depositing positive into your partner. Because every time you fight, you're deducting actually. So sometimes you need to always add on to that little jar that you both have. Yeah.
Replenish the vessel that is your relationship.
Precisely.
I think that's beautiful. And I think that if we can make sure that we know our voice coming into the relationship, then we all have that ground zero of what we come back to. And God, Adeline, we said this. We said we'll keep it about 30 minutes, but I also knew that we could do a whole series of webinars on relationships. But I'm just going to come out of the slides for a minute so that I can get us back on full screen. Just to say thank you so much, Adeline. That was fantastic. I really hope our audience today is able to take away some thoughts and ideas about their own voice and their journey in relationships. Adeline, in terms of resources, which one would you say to our viewers today? Like what you think is the most important one to reach out to find your own voice?
With regards to relationships, I really like the 5 love languages. I think that's a good place to start. There's this book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Yes,
that's an interesting book too. Yeah, it's a classic. So understanding a little bit on what's on the other side of the fence. Because a lot of times, a communication comes to a breakdown because of lack of empathy. So just understanding a little bit on what's happening in their minds or partner's mind, that will really help. Yeah, I hope I can leave them with that. And if you need anything, feel free to reach out to Mita or myself. I mean, we're always open to say hi.
Thank you so much. So at the end of this webinar, at the end of the podcast will be sent. You'll have contact details for myself and Chris and Adeline as well. And we'll attach links to all of the different sources to help you with your voice as an individual and in a relationship. So thank you everyone for tuning in today. And Adeline, thank you again for being our guest.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
Pleasure.
Keep safe.
Bye.
Bye.